It's horrendous. It's, obviously that's just incredibly insane.
You could go to jail for saying something which you think.
No one should be treated this way.
Mass arrests for people who are pretty much peaceful.
A very worrying time because this has happened before and it didn't end too well.
Dzień dobry, jest 6:50, a ja wyruszam na angielską wieś. Miałam jechać z Kasią, ale złamała nogę. Przewróciłam się. Nie wstałam nawet z łóżka i się przewróciłam. No zdarza się. Dotarłam do Paddington Station. Pada deszcz. Idę coś zjeść i ruszam dalej. Obiad. No i teraz jedziemy z Paddington do Swindon, a ze Swindon do Stroud, czyli na angielską wieś. Jadę już dzisiaj 5. pociągiem. Jestem zmęczona. Oj. Jedzenie. Przyszłam kupić książkę na mój samotny wieczór i tutaj są takie ciekawe działy. Ogrodnictwo, koleje, okultyzm i ezoteryka.
I think that Stroud is, in a lot of ways, a very nice place to be if you're coming to England. It's not too busy, it's pretty safe compared to a lot of larger places. I grew up here and I've never really felt like I've been in any intense danger.
And how you find life right now in England?
It's scary, it is scary watching the world kind of falling to pieces a bit, but the best you can do really is keep yourself whilst staying aware, but not so much that you freak yourself out. I feel like that's a very difficult balance to get, is keeping up to date with everything horrid happening in the world, but not destroying your own mental state. I think that's very difficult.
So how you find right now freedom of...
It's not great. I can't believe that our government is doing this, and it's quite scary watching it happen, and feeling that anxiety about the fact that you could go to jail for saying something which you think, and I don't know, it's terrifying, really. It's been getting worse and worse over a long time, I think, but I think it's definitely ramped up in the last few years because there's been some insane fascist rise in the world in a bizarre way, very suddenly. So it's just gotten worse over the last couple of years. But also, maybe I wasn't aware of it before the last 2 years, so I don't really know. But watching it happen on our screens is just insane, and it's so difficult to comprehend that the people that you think are supposed to be protecting you, like the police, can do this to actual people.
Thank you. Kupiłam 2 książki na wieczór. Jedną o tym mieście, a druga to klasyka na wieczór, ponieważ zaczynam się trochę czuć samotnie i myślę, że wieczór z książką to będzie lekarstwo na samotność. Stroud jest 18:30 i absolutnie większość sklepów jest zamknięta. Miasteczko powoli idzie spać w ten piątkowy wieczór. To jest droga do mojego noclegu. Nie wygląda to dobrze. Wygląda to bardzo niedobrze. Zawróciłam i będę szła jakoś naokoło, ale jestem w samym centrum miasteczka i jest tutaj ciemno, wszystko zamknięte. Nawet na tej drodze są lampy, ale się nie świecą. U mnie na wsi w Polsce włączają ostatnio lampy 2-3 godziny przed tym, jak się zrobi ciemno. No i to jest oczywiście szaleństwo. A tutaj jest zupełnie ciemno. Mijam kolejną lampę i wszystkie są wyłączone. A ja jestem 500 metrów albo 600 metrów od centrum miasta. To tutaj mam przepiękny pokój na wieczór. I przyjęli mnie niesamowicie mili ludzie. Dostanę herbatkę i czuję się jak w domu. Tutaj było dużo książek, mogłam nie kupować. Dostałam lody i malinki i czekoladę. Największą ciekawostką z dzisiejszego wieczoru jest to, że to łóżko jest podgrzewane i można ustawić sobie temperaturę grzania. Dobranoc. Jutro powiem, co ja w ogóle tutaj robię. Dzień dobry. Zaczynamy nowy dzień. Od śniadanka. Kocham śniadanka. Miasteczko wygląda przepięknie i malowniczo. Bardzo mi się podobają kolory domków. No i co ja robię na tej wsi? Przyjechałam do Maxa Lamany, który organizuje dzisiaj dzień na farmie. Max jest kucharzem i zajął bardzo wyraźne stanowisko w sprawie ludobójstwa w strefie Gazy, co jest o tyle godne podziwu, że różnie się to kończy w tym kraju. Idziemy na farmę. Hi Max.
Hey Olivia.
So how you ended up here on the farm?
Oh my goodness. It's a long story.
Okay.
But I'll tell you a quick little story. I wanted to get back to where food comes from. I wanted to learn the process before we grow our food, before the seed actually touches soil. I've spent years working in restaurants, and so for me, it's kind of going back to the basics, going back to where food all begins, and that's with the seed.
Jestem na ekologicznej farmie, która jest prowadzona metodą no-dig. Nie kopie się tutaj ziemi. Jak wytłumaczył mi jej właściciel, który jest profesorem na Oksfordzie, w jednej garści ziemi znajduje się więcej mikroorganizmów niż ludzi na całej planecie.
Tworzą one niezwykle złożoną siatkę połączeń, dzięki której gleba żyje, oddycha i przekazuje roślinom niezbędne składniki odżywcze. Tradycyjne przekopywanie ziemi w rzeczywistości ją zubaża, niszczy delikatne struktury, zaburza równowagę i prowadzi do obumierania wielu mikroorganizmów. Aby wysiać nasiona, na powierzchnię gleby wysypuje się cienką warstwę kompostu i to w niej się je umieszcza, bez ingerowania w głębsze warstwy. Zdrowa gleba zawiera znacznie więcej minerałów i składników odżywczych, dzięki czemu nie ma potrzeby stosowania chemicznych nawozów, a w efekcie cała farma jest również mniej podatna na działanie szkodników. Ta metoda jest bardzo zbliżona do permakultury. Najważniejsza jest uważność na naturalne procesy zachodzące w glebie oraz na niezakłócanie jej bioróżnorodności.
Ta sałata jest najostrzejszą sałatą, najostrzejszym warzywem, jakie kiedykolwiek w życiu jadłam. Smakuje trochę jak chrzan z ostrą papryką.
Max nam ugotował obiad i dostaliśmy jeszcze pesto na wynos.
It's horrible what's happening in Palestine for our brothers and sisters over there. No one should be treated this way, and the least that we can do is stand up, speak up, go to protests, vote with our money. So, you know, boycotting specific brands, and voting for the right people in your politics, in your government. So that's the least we can do as decent human citizens. So we're not always going to get it right. Our government isn't always going to get it right. But I think if we all collectively come together to speak up, to stand up and use our voices, we speak for those who are not able to speak at this time, and together, collectively, we're stronger.
Hello. And you can there you are. Oh, you lost something. Miss Pretty, you go away. Raphael, bring us, get a bucket and bring us panda. Panda? Those the community areas, so that they're easier to walk on compared to cows grazing.
Co było najpiękniejszego w dniu na farmie? Myślę, że ludzie i społeczność, jaka tutaj się tworzy. Ile nowych osób możesz spotkać i ogrom serdeczności. Nie miałam żadnych planów na resztę moich dni w Anglii. No i jadę do Bristol.
Okay. Oh look, this bit of sandwich. Oh, beauty. Welcome to Bristol. Welcome to Bristol, my studio. She loves her daddy. She's cool. She likes daddy. Daddy does exciting shit with her when mummy's not around. Yes, he does. Yes, Daddy does.
I love that you fight me on that. Oh, yes, he does.
Daddy does make up for us. Anyway, she's cool. She's fine.
Look at her little tail.
The only reason she's so cool is me.
No, she likes mummy.
Yeah, she likes mummy.
There we go.
Na to wydarzenie do pracy w polu na wsi przyjechali ludzie z całej Anglii, którzy na co dzień zajmują się zupełnie innymi rzeczami i przyjechali tam, żeby sadzić nasiona, zrobić razem obiad i spędzić razem czas. I na tym wydarzeniu poznałam Michaela i Kate, którzy zaproponowali mi, żebym pojechała z nimi do Bristol, bo nie miałam żadnych planów na kolejne dni. No i tak oto znalazłam się w tym mieście, w ich mieszkaniu. Dostałam pokoik. No i co? Idę spać. Idę spać. Dobranoc.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a volunteer at the Palestine Museum and Cultural Centre. We've been here since 2013. So the space actually used to be a nightclub. And then when it closed down, the owner of the nightclub, who owned the lease to the building, thought it would be a nice idea to turn it into a space for Palestine. And it was, up until recently, the only Palestine museum in Europe until the last sort of couple of years. And the greater focus that's been placed on the region. So it's an educational space, first and foremost, to teach visitors about it. We're open on the weekends. It's all volunteer run, which is why we're not able to open more often. We also have a lot of events here, film screenings, for example. So we have some screenings from the annual Bristol Palestine Film Festival are shown here, as well as a number of fundraisers, and we also have partners in Palestine as well, which is where we get our lovely ceramics and embroidery and keffiyehs and all that sort of thing. So I've been volunteering since 2021, it used to be, there'd be one person on shift only because we wouldn't have enough volunteers for more, and we'd get, some visitors, but not too many usually. We'd get about 10 during a shift, often, which was great. It's support to try and educate people no matter how many people turning up. But since October 7th, there was a very clear shift. I had a lot more visitors, a lot more interest, and a lot more volunteers as well. It is a shame that it took something as tragic as the essentially the genocide in Gaza to cause people to want to come to the museum and take a greater interest. But it is good that people are taking that time now more than they were before.
And do you think people right now are more aware of the situation in Great Britain?
Absolutely. Just based on the numbers of people turning up here, or the local events that are happening in Bristol. I've put on a few fundraisers, and these sell out quite quickly. A lot of people want to, support in where they can. Even though there are less protests going on right now, as there were maybe a year ago, those protests were definitely being attended in much larger numbers than before October 7th. Definitely.
Thank you.
No worries.
When we're talking about the perception of how Palestine is seen, I've seen a big shift. I used to protest for Palestine going back 15 years ago when I was about 18 years old, and it would be something like 50, 60 people who would come out. And sometimes we'd even say, we'd be talking to people about Palestine and they'd be like, Pakistan? Literally people didn't know. And so post October 7th, there was this initial 2 weeks where the country was rallying behind Israel, and then slowly things started to unfold in Gaza, and the perception really shifted. I do think that it's probably in part to do with TikTok, the younger generation, the way that they consume media, and also the videos that we were getting out. And there was such an uproar in what they were seeing and what was happening, and a lot of people, I feel like, started looking into the history. I remember I went down to the local library and I was looking at books on Palestine, and it was all like on loan. So many books were being taken out. People were taking an actual interest in the history, and things like what did surprise me, because I was actually overseas. I was working overseas when a lot of the protests were happening here, and seeing that there was almost 1 million people who marched in London was absolutely incredible. And something, going back 15 years ago when I started doing protests and started learning about what was happening in Palestine, I never would have thought that this country would have that kind of a reaction or understanding of what was happening. So I think that there's been a really big shift in how Palestine is perceived, and also how Israel is perceived, because there's a lot of emotions there. There's a lot of guilt there. There's a lot of needing to. I think it's guilt to do with World War II and how much we helped and how much we didn't help and things like that. So, but now people are looking at what's happening in Gaza, and I think it is horrific. We're talking about 30,000 dead children. I think I saw a report, and it said that if you went to a funeral for one Palestinian a day, one Palestinian child a day, you would be going to funerals for 52 years. And, I think it's horrendous. It's, obviously that's just incredibly insane. But yeah, so seeing people, there is a shift in the general public, and maybe it is to do with being in the bigger cities. But yeah, there's a big shift in the British public towards how they look at Palestine. And again, it is the same thing it shouldn't have taken 80 years. It shouldn't have taken a genocide. These sort of things have been going on for decades, and we haven't done anything. And it's really horrible that it's taken something like this. And even now, there are people who don't seem to fully understand and grasp the situation. But yeah, so there is a big shift within the British public.
Do you feel comfortable with saying everything, or how your government reacted to these protests? Maybe that would be interesting.
So I wasn't in the country where I was working overseas, so I wasn't so familiar with everything that was happening. But there was a crackdown on people's ability to protest, and I think we're starting to see certain laws be re-looking at decisions that were made. So obviously I disagreed with the way that people were framing the protests and also pushing back against the protests. I do also understand that they were really big crowds. You're talking about 1 million people, so there needs to be structure, but mass arrests for people who are pretty much peaceful, just sat down, I think it's worrying. I think that it's worrying, and I feel like it's going to bleed into other areas of our freedom of speech. But we will see, and we're hoping that things will improve. And the other thing that's also important to notice is that this hasn't been something that, it wasn't a fad, a trend. It wasn't something that people were interested in a month, 2 months, 3 months. It's been 3 years almost. We're in our 3rd year now, and people are still engaged. So I think that it's a cultural shift now. It's not just a trend. It's something that's actually it's just there now. It's just a part of our society that we don't want to be, told that we can't protest over certain things. And we look at what's happening in Palestine, and we don't agree with what's happening. The majority of us, I think, don't.
Bristol Museum Art Gallery. Jestem w sali poświęconej Egiptowi. W Anglii znajdują się zabytki ze wszystkich stron świata. Ciekawostka. Starożytni Egipcjanie mumifikowali koty, składali je w ofierze bogom albo darowali w prezencie zmarłym, żeby towarzyszyły im w drodze ku zaświatom.
Pause the video?
Zrobiono muzeum
Yeah.
dla turystów.
Okay, buongiorno, welcome to Bristol. You can see how I can speak really quietly. The microphone will deal with it really well. No software required, you just plug it into the phone and now you speak.
Hi. Chyba będę musiała kupić mikrofon.
Hello, my name is Dylan Winter. I think it is absolutely abhorrent, the things that I've seen going on. I think that people holding signs saying they support an organisation and they oppose genocide being arrested when there's so much terrible things going on in the world, it seems targeted and not great, and loads of people getting arrested. I see an old man getting arrested for it. And it's absolutely abhorrent. This government is turning into, especially the British government, very, very ignorant of these kind of things. And we've been ignorant in the past, and we always have been. I don't think it's getting better, and I want it to get better. And I think people need to keep speaking out about these kinds of things, especially Palestine and freedom. And this government is complicit in the genocide. I do not agree with this government, and we should free Palestine, free Sudan, everything like that.
So what exactly happened with this Palestine Action Organization? What was all about it?
Well, the thing about it was, I'm not 100% sure what the organisation was, but I'm sure it was just people protesting and saying, but even if you say you support Palestine Action, that is a criminal offence now. But people can go around saying they support the IOF or the IDF, and people aren't doing anything about that. But as soon as you support it, got turned into a terrorist organisation, and that's what the government said. And the government said that, like, the artist Kneecap, they spoke out about it, and they spoke out about a load of things that the British government are doing wrong, and they got labelled as terrorists. And I don't think that you should label people being peaceful and talking about things that you're complicit in, and you should just label them as something that they're not. It's just a cop-out, I think, and it's really all going bad. I think that people should be allowed freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and that we're not getting that. We're losing that as of now in today's age, which I think is very appalling. I think that it's a very worrying time, because this has happened before and it didn't end too well,
Przyszłam do kawiarni, czytam angielską bajkę.
Pożegnałam się z moimi nowymi kumplami i wracam do Polski. Bardzo się cieszę, że się zdecydowałam przyjechać, bo przed wyjazdem miałam sobie mnóstwo obaw, że po prostu będę czuła się samotnie. A poznałam wielu wspaniałych ludzi i myślę, że aż tak dużo bym nie poznała, jakbym była z kimś w podróży albo w jakiejś grupie. I że te okoliczności też pozwoliły mi nawiązać więcej znajomości. Pierwszy raz jestem sama w podróży. Cześć, wróciłam już do Polski i udało mi się skontaktować z Jasmine Dean, która jest ekspertką do spraw humanitarnych, specjalizującą się w działaniach przeciwminowych oraz równości płci. Hi Jasmine.
Hello, Olivia.
I wanted to ask you, in which countries have you done humanitarian work over the past few years?
So, my first mission was in Cambodia. It was for a Belgian NGO in landmine clearance and demining. I was in Cambodia for just over a year in total, and in the middle of that work, I also worked in Yemen. So, two practical roles in these countries, and then for training and for meeting donors, we went to Vietnam and Jordan too.
That's impressive. I want to ask you, how do people in England feel about the current situation? Do you think that you have still full freedom of expression, or people are worried about what is happening nowadays?
I think generally, when it comes to our freedom to express opinion about any situation, but I know that you're perhaps more referring to political stances, people generally do feel safe. But what has happened in the past couple of years is that with what was going on with expressing your views on Palestine action, the response to that and the really strict arrests and, you know, sort of action against putting people in prison cells for just wanting to express that they oppose genocide, a state that is committing genocide. The fact that wanting to express something like that, which is, of course, just about wanting to keep people safe, to get the response that we did. And I'm sure you saw the news and you saw images and videos of people, you know, objectively harmless people, war veterans, the retired nurses, other retired law enforcement, to be, you know, put in handcuffs or taken to a cell for the night. It was just very surprising. And I think generally the British population are still trying to understand why that happened and how it even happened in the first place in a country that's meant to be built on democracy.
Could you explain what Palestine Action was about and what exactly happened?
Sure. And this is just my limited understanding, of course. I would encourage anyone to just go and do their own research. From when I did that myself, I initially had heard of Palestine Action. They're an organization that ultimately want to protect Palestinian rights, protect their human rights, and they oppose deeply, of course, the ongoing occupation, persecution, and genocide. That's the organization's MO, if you like. And what happened in, I believe it was June 2025, a few members of Palestine Action broke into military units and air bases. They vandalized pieces of equipment, I believe with spray paint, drawing graffiti, and they also damaged other components used for various mechanical objects. As I said, this is just secondhand, but planes and any other, I think, parts that could be used to create planes or other objects which are being used or are given and aiding Israel in their current occupation. And with this, following that, under the Terrorism Act 2000, it was enough to prescribe them So formally prescribing them as a terrorist group, that they have committed enough acts of a terrorist to be prescribed, and therefore from that point on, anyone within the organisation or outside of it who expressed support could face criminal charges. That's ultimately what happened.
And how public opinion changed after October 7, how it changed in the recent years? Do you think people in England are more concerned about Middle East and Palestine?
Yes, they are. I would say so. Since the 7th of October, I think that more people in the UK, myself included, and I know many of my friends, my colleagues, and people in wider circles, it was more a case that we just didn't know the full story. We didn't have the full picture because, and I think this applies for many countries across the world, but especially the UK, because of our colonial past and sadly the part that the British Empire played in why Palestine became occupied. We were never fully taught it in schools. I know I certainly wasn't, and fewer people and generations before me. So we just didn't know the extent of the occupation, the violence, how this had been happening. This certainly wasn't a recent development. It's been happening since the Nakba, the first Nakba, I should say, because sadly there's been many. So 7th of October, I think, shocking as that was, and I absolutely agree with the standpoint that any innocent lives of civilians taken away, whomever the identity, is unacceptable. It's just that I think a lot of people in the UK looked into Israel, Palestine, the politics around it, and did have more of an understanding for how Palestinian human rights have simply not been given, have been refused, have been violently refused in many cases. So there is more of a dialogue, there's more awareness, and I think generally British people want to free Palestine.
Do you believe that people have, normal people have some power to change this situation? Because so many people around the world gathered to protest and nothing happened.
That is a very good question. And it's difficult to give a simple, conclusive answer. But something that I will say, because we've talked about Palestine Action and we talked about the prescription in 2025, this year, or I think it may have been at the end of 2025. I need to check my timeline, but the prescription was deemed unlawful. So for even something like that to happen, and that was after the power of the people doing what they could, as you said, demonstrating, protesting peacefully, and just expressing their outrage at the decision, and a large group of people coming together in solidarity in the UK, but also abroad, as you mentioned, for Palestine Action, for Palestinian rights in general. There has been such an outpour of support. So I do think things could change. The prescription being deemed unlawful, that's something which I think before it happened, many people couldn't actually fathom, and it did. I do see that as a positive and as a glimmer of hope. But that being said, I think it's going to happen at a slow rate. The main people in power, in powerful positions, in positions of influence, for different reasons, they are not doing what they could do, what they should do to create change at a faster pace. So people should still continue using their voice to amplify the story of Palestinian people. I think it's going to take a long time, unfortunately, but we definitely should still continue.
Would you like to add something more, maybe?
Yes, since I have this opportunity, and thank you again for it. When we are reading the news every day, and not even just about Palestine, about Iran, South Sudan, Myanmar, Cambodia, Thailand, Venezuela. There are just sadly too many cases. I know that it's very upsetting to read, to internalize, and these days it's around us so frequently. But even if you can't immediately act and do something in that moment, even if you feel powerless, just being aware and listening to people's testimonials, to their stories, it means a lot. And to listen to that and just be understanding and compassionate, you are doing the right thing already. So I think to everybody in all of the countries currently facing conflicts or occupation, especially to them, hang in there. So I just hope that everybody who happens to be watching this doesn't completely lose hope and still stays informed and expresses their support.
What clever little monkeys we are, sitting on a rock right next to a star. Compared with our bodies, I suppose quite far. We don't know how lucky we all are. We don't know how lucky we all are. We spend our lives chasing numbers, but I don't believe death cares how much we need. We burn it in an instant just to hear ourselves breathe. How to